morning. I'm going to be very transparent with you guys this morning. This is not in my notes, but I don't want to be up here. It's been a hard weekend, and I really thought about just bowing out this week. But the reality is, I'm walking through a season where God is teaching me yet again to surrender the things that I cannot control and to trust Him. So it seemed fitting that I would come up here and share that when I'm in the midst of it. And then the songs this morning, goodness, DJ, like trying to get me crying before I even get started. So I'm going to try really hard not to cry. I'm going to just read what I wrote, and I'll try not to talk fast. But when I get nervous, I tend to talk fast. So I'm Rebecca. A little bit about my growing up. I grew up in a big family. I'm the third oldest of 9 children. Same mom, same dad. We moved around a lot for the first 8 years of my life. I have siblings who were born in Georgia, Ohio, Virginia, Alaska. Church was always a big part of our family. Finding a church home whenever we would move was always my mom's priority. As far back as I can remember, I knew that God was real, and I saw how important my mom's faith was to her. When I was 8 years old, my father was arrested for the first time in my life. At this point, I decided that I was tired of the decisions that adults make having such a negative impact on my life. And I can very vividly remember standing in the kitchen and thinking, 10 more years, and nobody else gets to make decisions about my life. And that just kind of stuck with me, and it's kind of a pivotal thing of like, nobody gets to control what happens to me. Okay, so then my parents stayed married during this time. My dad was in prison for the next 6 years. Our family was heavily involved in church. We would visit my dad 1 week in a month. And then although church and God were a very active part of my life, I was baptized at 8 years old. I never really understood when people talked about having a relationship with God. I knew He was real. I saw my mom's faith. I just felt like I was missing something. My mom used to encourage us to view God as our heavenly Father because our earthly father wasn't around. But unfortunately, that had a really negative impact on my view of God because my earthly father was someone that I loved, but I felt like I wasn't good enough for him to stick around, and he was someone that I couldn't trust. So I kind of took all of that and put all that on God, so that's fun. Fast forward to 14. My dad comes home from prison. I worked really hard to keep him at arm's length for the first couple of weeks, and I remember that he and my mom brought me into their room to talk, and he just broke down. And he cried, and he promised me, like, I will never do anything illegal again. I'm never going to leave. I'm here. So I worked really hard to let my walls down and to trust him again, and less than 2 years later, he was on the run from the law. From 16 to 18, my dad was on the run, arrested, escaped from prison, arrested again. During this time of my life, I definitely didn't view God as someone I could trust, someone that I was enough for, because I felt like He, like my earthly father, had abandoned me. During this time, I also met and fell in love with a young youth pastor. And we were married shortly before I turned 19. Going from prisoner's daughter, black sheep family of the town, to pastor's wife, and Ron was like the adored pastor's wife. Everybody loved him. It was a weird transition for me. I learned very quickly that I lived in a fishbowl, a different kind of fishbowl, and that everybody had their expectations of how I was supposed to act, dress, talk, etc. My need for control continued to grow during this time, and my desire to rely on others and God continued to shrink. That's a hard dynamic when you're young and newly married. Ron was often the exception, but not always. Again, God and church were a very big part of my life, but I still struggled with what it meant to have a relationship with Him. I even talked to Ron about it, and he would encourage me to get into the Word. I did at times, but never consistently. Again, I just felt like I was missing something, and I wasn't sure what it was. We had our daughter, Meredith. Ron joined the Army. It was a relief for me to not feel the pressure of being a pastor's wife, just a chaplain's wife. We had our son. Ron deployed shortly after he went active duty, and I spent the next 15 months raising our babies, my younger brother Colt, who came to live with us, and going to college by myself. When Ron came back, he had PTSD, though I didn't know exactly what it was at the time. And he will tell you that I was not the same person when he came back either. Spending 15 months feeling like I could only rely on myself just kind of reinforced all my control issues. Yay. So we worked through some hard stuff. We moved again. Ron ended up having unexpected open heart surgery. While he was recovering from his surgery, we found out that our son David had the same heart condition. And as we were navigating all of that, my older brother Clay died from a heart condition. When my mom told us that he died, I remember it was like a kick to the gut. I cried, fell apart for a little bit, but then I realized I had to get it together so that I could go home and plan the funeral for my mom. See, over the years, I had kind of become the family member that held it together, or at least seemed like I held it together for everyone. So I went back to my mom's, planned the funeral, picked the casket, burial spot, did everything I could to keep it together for my family and make it easier for them. After my brother's funeral, I broke my foot and was stuck at home with my grief and my own thoughts. This was probably the first time in my entire life that I had no choice but to face all the things. It was ugly. I fell apart. I didn't just fall apart because Clay died. It's like everything that I had been trying to control and keep together just came right up with it. I was so angry at God. In my mind, I could justify all of the pain that my family had gone through, that I went through, because at least we all had each other. Maybe it wasn't an ideal situation, but we were all there. But when Clay died, I couldn't make sense of anything anymore. Sorry, one second. I spent more time than I care to admit being angry, telling God how angry I was at him. I knew he was real. I knew he was the only one who could have changed the dynamics of my life, who could have given my brother a healthy heart. And I felt like he had completely let me down. My mom used to tell me growing up that God was a big God, and he knew what I was thinking and feeling anyway, so I might as well tell him. So I did. And poor Ron had to put up with me through all of this, but he was a saint. One day, I was out mowing the lawn and just kind of ranting in my head and out loud to God. And it's like I finally ran out of steam. I felt like I could so clearly hear God say, "Are you done?" I was. And that was my moment of surrender. That is when I feel like my walk with God started. He had always been walking with me, but I had kept him at arm's length. I didn't want to need anyone, not even God. I had to get to a point in my life where I had zero control and had completely run out of steam to surrender myself to him. If you ask me today what surrender looks like, I'm not even sure I could tell you. I know what it felt like. I felt like this huge burden that I had been carrying since I was 8 years old was lifted off my shoulders. There were times that I would physically give things over to God because I was tired of being strong and trying to carry it all by myself. And I knew that I needed to give him things, but I wasn't sure how, so I would just be like, here's this. It just made sense for me to visually. I started challenging what I thought I knew about him. I started getting into the Word, doing Bible studies, asking Ron all kinds of hard questions, and just trying to learn who God is. I had to unlearn what I thought I knew. I had to remind myself that he was not my dad. He had never abandoned me. I did not have to be good enough for him because his grace was sufficient for me. I'm still a work in progress. I wish I could say that with surrender comes clarity, but it doesn't. There are still things that I don't understand, things that I can't make sense of, but what I will tell you is it has brought me peace. My circumstances haven't changed all that much, but my heart has. My dad is still in prison. I love him dearly, and we have a relationship. He's still married to my mom. I still deal with hard things, like this weekend. my heart is completely broken over a situation this weekend that I can't get into or I'll just start crying. But if you ask me on the side, I'll tell you. But I know that God saw all of it coming. I know he is good. I know that his ways are higher than mine. I know that his plan isn't always my plan. And I might not like it, but I trust him. He has never left me, and he never will.